the third chapter. We are starting today the third chapter of Ilchot Avoda Zara of Harambam, Mishne Tora. We studied chapter 2 yesterday. And chapter 3 is a continuation. Chapter 3 really is at the center of what Avoda Zara is, actually defines the kind of things that someone might do and be liable for the punishments that come on account of Avoda Zara. Just to give you a very brief introduction, if you want to remember the chapter we studied last week and this chapter, just look at the Ten Commandments, at the Aseret HaDevarim. And you have Anochi Adonai Elohecha is the first one, which really represents the things we do believe in. And then following that, we have the second commandment actually includes most of the things having to do with Avodah Zarah. It has Lo yeh lecha Elohim acherim al panai, which is more in the abstract. It's the cognitive idea. Sorry, just 1 second. Sorry about that. So this chapter deals with the second part of the second commandment, which is Lo tishtahave lahem velo ta'ov them. We may not make idols for worship purposes, and also we may not do two things with them. Pay attention. Lo tishtahave lahem. We may not bow down to them, velo ta'ov them, and we may not worship them. So it's clear here from the second commandment that there is two kinds of worship that are not the same. There is bowing down and there is worshiping. So that's mostly the central point that this chapter is going to make. And with that, we start Halacha Aleph. Kol ha'oved avodah zara birtzono bezadon hayav karet. First and foremost, the consequence. Whoever worships Avodah Zara willingly and willfully, hayav karet, he's liable for karet, which is it's as between him and God. God will not treat this person, will not give him the privileges that come with being part of the Jewish people, which is pretty much automated entry to Olam Haba. And and as far as things go down here, if there were witnesses and hatra'a and a warning, a very explicit warning, telling him if you do this, buddy, you are going to die, and he says, I'm still going to do it, niskal. The punishment is sekila. It's one of the 4 capital punishments, and it's the most severe of them. We are going to study exactly what skila means towards the end of the book, so we have about 900 chapters to go till we study that. If this was bishaga means through some kind of ignorance, either ignoring what was being done or ignoring that which was being done was forbidden, then the consequence is that the person needs to bring an offering of hatat. Hatat kevu'ah, a fixed hatat, means that as opposed to korban ole veyored, it's not an offering that depends on the person's means. Everyone brings the same thing. There is many kinds of worships, many kinds of rituals that worshippers of Avodah Zarah establish for each form that is worshipped and for each representation that is worshipped. And actually, not all Avodot Zarot are worshipped the same way. Take for example Peor. It was a very famous Avodah Zarah back when Am Yisrael was entering Eretz Israel. Peor, as the word implies, is worshipped by some kind of exposing yourself to the statue. So there is a statue, you expose yourself to the statue, and that's the way you worship it. Very, of course, fascinating psychosexual things going on here. We're not going to get into that. Merkulis. Merkulis is another word for Mercury, as Jacob Ovadia mentioned in his class. The word miércoles, Wednesday in Spanish, comes also from Merkulis. Mercury was always, it represents the star Mercury, and it used to be worshipped by, there was some sort of something made with stones, and then you'd worship it by throwing stones at it, or to clean up the stones that people had thrown on it or next to it. That's the way you worship it. So if you do these things, even though they are weird things, they are bizarre, you expose yourself or you're throwing stones at something, still, this is the way that these Avodot Zarot are meant to be worshipped. It's the prescribed way by the Avodah Zara, and therefore this is Hayav. The person who does this is liable for Avodah Zara. And many other kinds of worships were established for other forms, for other deities with lower D. Bet. לפיכך הפועל עצמו למרקוליס או שזרק אבן לפעור פטור עד שיעבוד אותו דרך עבודתו. Therefore, whoever exposes himself to Merkulis, it's a wrong object of worship. או שזרק אבן לפעור, or if he throws a stone to peor, again, different worships that don't apply to that particular idol, patur is not liable. Of course, it's not permissible, but it's not liable. עד שיעבוד אותו דרך עבודתו, until the person does it the way it's supposed to be done. Because when the Torah introduces Avodah Zarah, it starts by having this hypothetical case, lest it be, says Moshe Rabbeinu, that you come and you ask, how do the Goyim do this Avodah Zarah, so I join them. In other words, it's important to know how the Goyim do it in order to actually satisfy the elements of this felony. And this is why the Jewish court needs to understand very well how these Avodot Zarot, how these idols used to be worshipped by the Goyim. Because the only way by which they'll come to exact a capital punishment is if they establish very clearly that the person has worshipped this idol the way it's meant to be worshipped. והזהרה של העבודות אלו וכיוצא בהן שכתוב ולא תעבדם, and when it says ולא תעבדם in עשרת הדברים, like we just mentioned, this is generally the way that these are meant to be worshipped. So ולא תעבדם is, Velota of them is going to have two applications. The first application is what we are saying right now, is Avoda, what we are going to call later Avoda Kedarkah, is worshipping Avodah Zarah the way it's meant to be worshipped. I want to open a parenthesis and ask a question, the answer of which I don't know, but I'll speculate. What happens if I wake up one morning and I decide I want to worship the grass? Nobody has ever worshipped this grass before. And I decide that the way to worship this grass is by cutting it. And I go and I cut that grass. Did I worship this grass the way it's meant to be worshipped? In other words, is this religion something individual that I can decide? Or in order to be hayav, do I need to do something that is conventionally understood as worship by others? And if it's the latter, which sounds more reasonable, what if there were three people who started a certain Avodah Zarah? Is that enough to be liable for Avodah Zarah, or does it need to be something adopted by a larger group of people? I don't know the answer to this. I suspect, though, that because of the political aspect of Avodah Zarah, it does need to be something that is recognized by some political entity. So there needs to be some political backing to the rules of Avodah Zarah for it to be deemed to be kedarkaha, for it to be deemed to be on its way. In other words, for the way of worship to be recognized as a way of worship in order to be liable when someone does that way. Gimal. במה דברים אמורים? Sorry, I'm losing the page here. בשאר עבודות, חוץ ממשתחווה וזובח ומקטר ומנסח. Okay, now we come to the second flavor of ולא תעובדם. We said if you do things that the Avodah Zara is meant to be worshipped by, you are hayav. There is another way by which you can be hayav, and that is if you do to the Avodah Zara any of these four activities. Now, these four activities are extremely broad. They include many activities that are like this activity. So let's understand them exactly what it means. So when did we say that you're only liable if you worship Avodah Zarah the way it's meant to be worshipped, but if you worship it any other way, you are patur? When you are doing anything other than these four actions. But mishtahave, which means to bow down, zoveah means to do shehita, to slaughter something or to cut something in honor of the Avodah Zarah. Mekater is to burn something in honor of Avodah Zarah. Menasech is to pour something on the Avodah Zarah or in honor of the Avodah Zarah. Now, we are going to see in the next halachot, this is not very specific. In other words, just to preview, we are saying to slaughter, right? But even if you cut something, like if you cut a piece of wood, that is a form of zobeach. That is a form of slaughter. Although there is no animal here, there is no blood, there is no knife. It's the action of cutting. And I'm sure there is also a lot to be said about, again, the psychosexual underpinnings for these four actions, why these four actions are the ones that people feel compelled to do to the deities. I'm going to leave the question open. Obviously, it goes beyond the scope of what we are saying here, but these things are really, really important for anyone trying to understand the Torah, because just to note, the Torah prescribes these four things in the worship of Borei Olam, of God. So there is something to them, that they do satisfy a certain human innate need. And by the way, we do find them from an anthropological, sociological standpoint. We do find them across civilizations, across ages. Even today, go to Japan and you'll see how many people are mekaterin, or go to Mexico, you'll see in churches people doing incense, etc., etc. Or candles. Candles is also probably a form of hekter. So if someone engages in one of these four actions to any Avodah Zarah, it doesn't matter if it's Markolis, if it's Peor, if it's any Avodah Zarah, Hayav, he's liable. Even though this is not one of the prescribed ways. If you open the manual how to worship Peor, it does not say you bow down to it. But still, if you bow down to it, you're engaging in these universal acts of worship, these four universal acts of worship, and you're Hayav. כיצד? הרי שניסח לפעור שזבח למרקוליס חייב שנאמר זובח לאלוהים יחורם. And how do we know that it's חייב? Because it says זובח לאלוהים יחורם. If someone does shechita, slaughters an animal in honor of a god, and this is not the god, yahoram, he's to be put in herem, which is another way of saying he's going to be subject to the capital punishment, and everything he owns is not going to be, there's going to be herem on everything he owns. ג' זביחה בכלל עבודות הייתה, ולמה יסת? לומר לך, מה זביחה מיוחדת שעובדים בה לשם וחייב הזובח לאל אחר סקילה עליה? בין הייתה דרך עבודתה בזביחה או אינה בזביחה, אף כל עבודה שהיא מיוחדת לשם, אם עבד בה לאל אחר, בין שהייתה דרך עבודתה בכך, בין שאינה בכך חייב עליה. לכך לאמר, לא תשתחווה לאל אחר. לחייב על ההשתחוויה, אפילו אין דרך עבודתו בכך. So let's go back to the second commandment. We said, לא תשתחווה להם ולא תעובדם. ולא תעובדם we explained. ולא תעובדם is the kinds of worships that a person does that are specifically prescribed to that Avodah Zarah. Example, throwing a stone to Markulis, exposing yourself to Peor. We said everything that the four avodot, the four universal forms of worship that are exclusively reserved to God, if anyone engages in any of those with respect to Avodah Zara, to an idol, to an entity other than God, then he's Hayav as well. And how do we know this? Because of Lo tishtahave lahem, or because of Zoveach laElohim Yahoram. We have a few pesukim in the Torah that single out these kinds of worship. They don't single out all four of them. There is no pasuk that says that whoever is maktir, whoever burns something in honor of a god, is engaging in avodah zarah. But we do have these two. We have the zeviha, which is the slaughter or the cutting, and we have the ishtahavaya, the pasuk that Rambam brings, the pasuk that we quoted from the second commandment. And what Chachamim said here, the way they interpreted this, is what these two have in common is that both are kinds of worship that are reserved to God. They don't necessarily fit within the specific instructions with respect to any specific avodah zarah, and yet the person is hayav sekila. So too, we have this now category. We create this category of four universal kinds of worship that, regardless of whether or not it's kedarkah, regardless of whether or not this is a form of worship of this specific avodah zarah, anyone who engages in them with respect to anyone but God is hayav. Vehu, now let's qualify what we said, provided, vehu adin, no qualification, vehu adin limkater umnasech v'zorek umnasech echad hu. Okay, and so just like we have zoveach and mishtahave in the Torah, they are called out. The same applies to mekater and menasech. V'zorek umnasech. Now menasech is libation, is to actually pour a liquid, like we do nisuch hamayim on Sukkot. In Sukkot, they used to, and in the Beit HaMikdash, the instruction is to pour water on the mizbeach. That's menasech, to pour a liquid. V'zorek umnasech echad hu. Throwing something and pouring something is the same thing. In other words, if you throw, let's say, blood on the wall of the mizbeach, another kind of thing that we would do, this is a form of menasech. And this is to answer the question, hey, I thought that one of the most important parts of worship, of the worship that was reserved to God, the most important part of the korban, actually, as we are going to learn, is the zerikat hadam, is to take the blood that came from the korban and to throw it on the wall of the mizbeach. So where is that in the four universal actions that constitute avodah zarah? The answer is zorek umnasech echad hu. Nisuch includes zorek as well. Nisuch, which is one of the four universal ones, also includes zerika, like throwing the blood on the mizbeach. Safat la hatzoah o shenisech la avit shel lememe raglayim hayav. Now we are going to talk about what a person is offering. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you are pouring on the avodah zarah. The pouring, the act of pouring, is not an act that, in the psychology of human beings, represents something respectful. It's actually an action of these four, is an action that is a little less respectful. It's a little more, almost as if it were you're doing something to the avodah zarah. You're not feeding it. You're not providing anything to it. You're not offering something, but it's, I want to say it's a little violent in the very psychological sense. I'm not saying that you are actually causing any harm, but it does reflect a certain violence that we have. And therefore, consistent with that, it doesn't matter what the object of that throwing is. So even if it's so'ah, if it's feces, or if it's urine, you are still going to be hayav. Shahat lahagav patur, ela im ken hayta avodatah bechach. However, if what you are slaughtering is a hagav is a grasshopper, but it comes to represent any kind of insect. Insects are not usually subject to shechita. People don't cut them. People who eat insects, they just cook them as is and then eat them, or they eat them as is. So this is something weird, it's out of the ordinary, and therefore it's patur, unless this is the way that this particular Avodah Zarah used to be worshipped. Same thing if the shechita is of an animal that is missing a limb, also something out of the ordinary. Across cultures, universally, when someone worshipped any deity, any idol, through an offering of an animal, that animal is always whole, is always complete. If it's missing a limb, this is out of the ordinary, and it's not one of these four universal actions. Unless this was the way that this particular Avodah Zarah used to be worshipped. עבודה זרה שעובדים אותה במקל, שבר מקל בפניה חייב ונאסרת. If an Avodah Zarah is known to be worshipped through sticks, there were Avodah Zarah that were used to be worshipped through sticks. שבר מקל בפניה, if someone breaks a stick in front of it, חייב ונאסרת, the person is liable. Again, as we said, this is a form of shechita. It's not an animal, it's a makel, but this particular Avodah Zarah is worshipped with maklot, with sticks. Therefore, he's going to be hayav v'ne'eseret. And if he does it for the first time, that's how an Avodah Zarah becomes asur, as we'll see in the following chapters. If this is done for the first time, this action of breaking the stick will render this Avodah Zarah sort of like active Avodah Zarah, and therefore it becomes forbidden. זרק מקל בפניה חייב ואינה נאסרת, שאין זריקת המקל כעין זריקת הדם, שהרי המקל כמות שהוא והדם מתפזר. However, we cannot take this extension of these four universal acts too far. So we are saying that breaking a stick is like slaughtering. There is an act of violence here also, but the violence, by the way, is not toward the Avodah Zarah, like Zorek. The violence here is towards the object that's being offered. Okay, so this is consistent. However, how about nisuch? So nisuch, we said, when we pour something, this includes also throwing something. But there's going to be a qualification now and a clarification. This is not throwing objects. When you throw an object, it's not one of the four universal acts. Pouring or throwing is only considered nisuch when it's of something that spreads out. I'm not going to say liquid. Harambam did not say liquid. I presume that also sand probably is capable of being mitnasech. But a makel, a stick, a piece of wood, if you throw that to the Avodah Zarah, you would not be hayav mishum menasech, which is one of the four universal acts. On the other hand, markulis, if you throw a stone to markulis, you are hayav, but again, not because throwing is one of the four universal acts. Throwing is one of the four universal acts only when it's something that spreads out like liquids, rather because this is the way you worship markulis. Shari makel kemot shehu, because the stick stays the way it is. There is no change in the stick when you throw it at the Avodah Zarah. V'hadam mitpazer, whereas the blood, when you throw blood on the wall of the Mizbeach, the blood scatters, it spreads. המקבל עליו אחד מכל מיני עבודה זרה באלוה, חייב סקילה. Now we are going to another form of worship. So we spoke about worship kedarka, worship in the way the Avodah Zarah is meant to be worshipped, like throwing a stone to Markulis. We spoke about Avodah shelo kedarka, a worship not in a particular way that was prescribed for Avodah Zarah, but through one of the four universal ways. And now a third kind of Avodah, a third kind of worship is the moment the person agrees to, accepts the authority of this particular idol, of this particular idol or deity. So that's accepting this Avodah Zarah be'eloah, hayav sekila, and a person would be hayav sekila, although all that person did was a symbolic action. Afilu higbiha levena ve'amar lah eli ata. Even if a person takes a brick, erects it, and then says to the brick, I'm hereby erecting you, and you are now my God. In other parentheses, no human being was ever so feeble-minded to think that a brick that was just erected had any power inherently, or that brick had any life in it. Rather, the whole idea always was and always is that the moment you erect the brick, you're preparing it, you're making it capable of receiving the spirit that you're trying to worship. So a more clear example would be that the moment I'm lifting the brick, I'm also thinking of the moon, and I'm thinking I want to worship the moon, and I'm hereby lifting the brick, and the spirit of the moon is now going to inhabit inside this brick, and therefore when I worship the brick, I'm worshiping the moon. But the moment I do that, the moment I inaugurate this Avodah Zara, I make it into something that has authority over me, even if it's a brick, וכל כיוצא בדיבור זה, or anything else that has the same meaning, חייב ואפילו חזר בו בתוך כדי דיבור ואמר אין זה אלי, אין חזירתו כלום אלא נסכל. And there is no, this is one of those lines that once you cross it, you crossed it. There is no going back. There is no going back and saying, oh no, actually brick, sorry, I'm going to take the other brick. You're still חייב for that first brick. העובד עבודה זרה כדרכה ואפילו עשה דרך ביזיון חייב. When someone does Avodah Zara the way it's supposed to be done, even if the intention was to disrespect that Avodah Zara, the person will be liable. כיצד? הפועל עצמו לפעול כדי לבזותו, זרק אבן למרקוליס כדי לבזותו. If I expose myself before Peor, not in order to worship it, but in order to actually embarrass it, or I throw a stone to Markulis to embarrass it, this is also Avodah Zara. This is a very interesting psychological insight here. This might actually be what the people who are doing this Avodah Zara are craving. The kind of instinct that is being satisfied is an instinct that you actually want to do something to that Avodah Zara that makes you feel like you're embarrassing it. And therefore, your motivation here is right in line with what was intended, but more to the point, technically speaking, the motivation is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. If you do it the way it's meant to be done, you're hayav. Hayav, umevi korban ashigagato. He's hayav. And if he did not do it knowing that this was the worship, so here Harambam is actually, it's a very hard to understand phrase. Let me explain the problem and the answer. If someone throws a stone, I'm going to skip one of the two examples. If someone throws a stone at Markulis in order to embarrass it, and he didn't know that this is the way that Markulis was worshipped, so he's hayav hatat. If he knew that this was the way Markulis was worshipped, and he thought Markulis was a god, and he wanted through this worship to embarrass Markulis, he was upset at what happened to him on a Wednesday, miércoles, and he wanted, because of that, to take it out on this representation of Mercury, of Markulis, and take a stone and throw it at it, then he's hayav sekila. That is the difference here. So Harambam is hayav, comma, umevi korban shigato. Harambam is here presenting the two alternatives, which depend on the person's mindset at the time, but either way, he's going to be hayav, either sekila or hatat. Halacha vav. Very important halacha. Now, there is a certain threshold of intelligence that has to be met for Avodah Zara to be Avodah Zara. Things that are too silly, things that are too childish, things that are some sort of a fetishism that's done with Avodah Zara does not normally qualify as the actual Avodah Zara for which someone is Hayav Sekila. And in fact, in the times of the Gemara, the Amoraim were pretty permissive, were pretty liberal in judging what the Goyim around us do as something that doesn't rise to the level of Avodah Zara because it lacks the level of sophistication, of intelligence of what we just described. So, העובד עבודה זרה מאהבה, כגון שחשק בצורה זו מפני מלאכתה שהייתה נאה ביותר, או שעבדה מעידתו להשם מתרע לו, כמו שמדמים עובדיה שמטיבה ומרעה. If I worship, let's say, a statue of a lady that's known to be, let's say, of Shiva, because I'm infatuated with how beautiful all of those arms are, and that's why I worship it. Or if I worship, let's say, Buddha, because I think that if I don't worship Buddha, Buddha is going to harm me. Okay, so it's out of fear or out of attraction. Very common motivators, by the way. This is not Avodah Zara. If in addition to that, I also agreed, accepted, consented to the authority of that Avodah Zara, then I'm Hayav Sekila. So if I go to Japan and I give incense to Buddha because I'm afraid that Buddha is going to kill me at night, I'd be patur unless I also accept or acknowledge that Buddha is now my authority. That is what Eloah means. ואם עבדה דרך עבודתה באחת מארבע עבודות מאהבה ומיראה פטור פת. If I worship Buddha, I go and I put incense, which is one of the four universal acts, and I'm scared that if I don't do this, he's going to come and eat me at night. But on the other hand, I never agreed to Buddha telling me what to do. That's Eloah. Then I'm patur. And this is probably most people around the world. So there is a very strong argument. Rabbi Yohanan makes that point in the Gemara that most goyim are not worshipping Avodah Zara. Similarly, Rabbah also makes a similar point in Bavel. ו' המגפף עבודה זרה והמנשק לה והמכבד והמרביץ לפניה והמרחיס לה והסח והמלביש והמנעיל. All kinds of actions, וכל כיוצא בדברי כבוד האלו, all kinds of actions that the person does for Avodah Zara that are not the way that Avodah Zara is worshipped and are not one of the four actions that we enumerated, but they are actions that are naturally, inherently, they are meant, they signify that you're trying to honor the object of those actions, like for example, hugging, kissing, cleaning, etc. Although it's not Avodah Zara per se, in terms of being Hayav Sekila, over belo ta'aseh shene'emar velo ta'avdem. This is included within the larger form of velo ta'avdem, which includes any kind of act that is done in honor of Avodah Zara. Udvarim elu bichlal avodah hen, and these things are a sort of a worship. Ve'af al pi chen eno lokeh al achat mehen. However, not only is there no sekila, but there also is no other punishment by the court, like malkut, because they were not explicitly mentioned by the Torah. However, if this was the way that you would worship, there was this statue that everyone worshipped it by kissing it, and you went and kissed it, and you did that kissing in order to do what everyone does, you're hayav. זין, ישב לו קוץ ברגלו בפני עבודה זרה, לא ישוח ויתלנו מפני שנראה כמשתחווה לה. Something a little different. What happens if you have a splinter on your foot next to a statue? So you should not bow down to take out that splinter from your foot, because it looks as though you're bowing down to the idol. נתפזרו לו מעות בפניה לא ישוח ויתלם. Same if you had coins fall next to it, you shouldn't bow down to retrieve them. מפני שנראה כמשתחווה לה. אלא ישב, rather, you should sit down on the floor, ואחר כך יתולן. Afterwards, you go and pick them up. ח' פרסופות המקלחות מים בפני עבודה זרה. They used to have, especially in Roman times, they used to have this kind, you can still see them around the world. You have this kind of statuettes, these statues that have, it's a face, and from that face, from the mouth of that face, water comes out. And this was normally done next to a temple, next to Avodah Zara. it has strong Avodah Zarah connotation. לא יניח פיו על פיהן וישתה, מפני שנראה כי מנשק לעבודה זרה. You cannot drink from them directly, because it looks as though you're kissing Avodah Zarah, although this is not the way it was worshipped, although you're not intending to do it, although it's not an action that is inherently respectful, you're just drinking water, but it has a hint of Avodah Zarah, and we stay away as far as we can from Avodah Zarah, as we'll see in the following chapters. העושה עבודה זרה לעצמו, אף על פי שלא עשאה בידו ואף על פי שלא עבדה הלוקה, שנאמר לו תעשה לך פסל וכל תמונה. Another prohibition now, whoever makes an idol for himself, makes a statue for himself, even if he didn't do it with his own hand, even if he does it by agency, he orders it from somewhere, and even before he worships it, he already is Hayav Malkut, because we also have in the second commandment, Lo ta'aseh lecha fesel v'chol temunah, we may not make any fesel, any carved representation, b'chol temunah, or any other kind of representation, obviously to worship. Similarly, if I don't do it for myself, even if a goy comes and asks me, hey, can you make this avodah zara for me? Then if I make that, I am loke. It's forbidden within the same pasuk. שנאמר ואלוהי מסכה לא תעשו לכם. I'm sorry, from a different pasuk, because it says ואלוהי מסכה לא תעשו לכם. You may not make any kind of אלוהי מסכה. מסכה is from it's like nesech, it's the same shorish as nesech, and it's something that is poured. It's something that is formed by pouring something. So the way they would mostly do it, like they did the Eigel Masecha, the Eigel Azahav, the golden calf, is you melt a metal and then you pour that liquid metal, that melted metal, into a form, into a mold, and that's Elohe Masecha. So we may not make this, and the Torah did not say you may not make it to worship it. So we may not make it, period, even if it's a goy that's going to worship it. That's why if someone makes Avodah Zarah for himself, now he violated two things. He made an Avodah Zarah, the action is forbidden, and he wanted an Avodah Zarah to be made. He happened to be the instrumentality for that, but now he violated two felonies. אסור לעשות צורות לנוי ואף על פי שאינה עבודה זרה, שנאמר לו תעשו איתי אלוהי כסף ואלוהי זהב. It's forbidden to make any representations, even for aesthetic purposes, and not for avodah zarah, because it says, Lo ta'asun iti, you may not make beside me, says God, any deities of silver or of gold. כלומר, צורות של כסף ושל זהב שהן לנוי, כדי שלא יטעו בהן הטועים וידמו שהם לעבודה. Meaning, any statues made of silver or of gold, even if for aesthetic purposes, so that others don't make the mistake to think that they are made for worship. Very important and significant qualification. Now, when asur lasur lenoi, el asurat hadam bilvad, but this prohibition only applies to a human shape. We may not make a Jew cannot make a human statue. לפיכך, אין שרין לא בעץ ולא בסיד ולא באבן צורת האדם. That's why we may not form, not carving on wood or beseed with some kind of ceramic or cement, ולא באבן or on stone, צורת האדם, a human shape. Another qualification, והוא שתהא אסורה בולטת, but this is only in 3D kind of images that have a 3D quality to them. כגון הציור והכיור שבתרקלים וכיוצא בהן, like you have these details sometimes on walls and so forth and so on, where you have a protruding kind of form of image. אבל אם הייתה סורה מושקעת או סורה של לסמנין, כגון הסורות שעל גבי הלוחות וטבליות שרוקמים באריג, but if the 3D quality to it was inwards, it wasn't outwards, it wasn't protruding out the shape. Let's say you have a shape of a face on a wall, and we are going to see in the next halakha an example of that. Then if it's protruding inwards, if it's actually carved inwards, that's not within the prohibition. Or if it's 2D, if it doesn't have any 3D quality to it, it's also not within this prohibition. Not only it's not within the prohibition, it's permissible. It's permissible to draw human beings. י' א', טבעת שיש עליה חותם של צורת אדם. They used to, back before the postal service, the way they would make sure that a letter is sent to a recipient and is only opened by the recipient is they would always have some kind of a wax seal on the letter signed by a signet, and that signet was unique to the person sending the letter, so you'd know if the signet is not broken that the letter was sent by that person. That's how you certified it. So tabat is one of those signets. שיש עליה חותם של צורת אדם. Let's say it has within it a human face, right? So when you put it on the hot wax to seal a letter, it's going to form a human face. אם הייתה צורה בולטת אסור להניחה ומותר לחתום בה. If the signet itself, the shape of that face on the signet itself protrudes out, it's a 3D image protruding out of a human face, then you are forbidden to have it because you're having a human face and it's forbidden to have a human face that's protruding out. ומותר לחתום בה, but you are permitted to use it. Why? Because the shape that comes from something that protrudes out protrudes in. It goes inwards. ואם הייתה הצורה שוקעת, מותר להניחה ואסור לחתום בה. If it was the other way around, that the signet went inwards, but when you sign with it, it creates a shape that protrudes in a 3D way outwards in the wax, then that is permissible to have, but is forbidden to use. מפני שהנחתם תעשה בצורה הבולטת, and because what you're creating is one of those protruding forms. Last halacha, וכן אסור דמות חמה ולבנה, כוכבים ומזלות ומלאכים. Now, a separate prohibition, this comes from a different sugya in the Gemara. It's also forbidden to, so we spoke about human shapes, right? It's also forbidden to make shapes of the sun and of the moon and of the stars and of the mazalot, of the constellations, umalachim, and of angels. In other words, it's forbidden to make forms that represent them. Okay? שנאמר לא תעשון איתי, this is another baraita in the sugya. You may not make beside me, so that baraita says anything that is beside me, says God. In other words, שמשי המשמשים לפניי במרום, לא תעשון כדמות שמשין המשמשים לפניי במרום. You may not do things that, so to speak, are beside God. In other words, they are, from a human point of view, they are up above in the heavens. ואפילו על הלוח. And this prohibition applies as opposed to human beings of human shapes. This prohibition applies even in 2D. I want to point out, Rabbi Yosef Kafeh says that and he brings proof from Perush HaMishnayot, Perek Gimal of Perush HaMishnayot of Mishna Avoda Zara of Rambam. He says that this is not talking about a simple representation of the sun to represent the sun in astronomy or of the sort. It's talking about the kind of representation of the sun that could come to be worshipped. So obviously nobody's going to worship a 3-year-old drawing of a sun on a paper, but they might come to worship a very detailed, very perfect statue of the sun. And of course, surah, as we said before, is not always the sun itself, but if you make something representing Apollo, which was the Roman god for the sun, the Greek god for the sun, it'd also be within this. Surot habehemot ushar nefesh haya chutz min ha'adam. This comes up pretty often, especially in synagogues. Any representation of any animal and any other living creature other than humans, besurot ilanot u'tshaim v'chayose bahem, or of trees or of other vegetation, mutar lasurotam, is permissible to draw them and to make them vafilu hayta surah boletet, even in a 3D kind of way. So yes, you may have a 3D lion, you may have a 3D menorah, you may have a 3D tree, etc. All of those were not forbidden, and with this we finish this chapter.